Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Index Office Hours. Today is the 4th of June, and this is Index Office Hours 160. There you go. Big number, big round number. We love that. It's incredible to see that we've come so far. So, if anyone is new to Index Office Hours, and let's have a look, we do have some new people, which is fantastic. This is the town square for graph ecosystem participants to come together and discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexes. This is a conversation and we love participation, so please do get involved in today's conversation. And you can do that by text in the text box in the corner, which many of you have already started to do or get involved via voice. And if you're having any challenges unmuting your mic or getting your voice to work, let me know and I can get that sorted for you. This session will be recorded and posted onto public channels like YouTube. So if you're concerned about privacy, please bear that in mind. And with that, let's get into today's agenda. So, as for opening remarks, we give a shout out to the latest GRTIQ episode, and today is no different. So, we have episode 171 with James Hendler. And James is the director and professor at the Re I can't pronounce that. The Rensselaer Polytech Institute, and he is also a pioneer of the semantic web. He's an OG contributor to the web, which is pretty cool. And so this is a pretty cool conversation talking about his background. He's worked at places like DARPA, which is pretty freaking cool. And he's worked on some foundational projects that have shaped the internet and AI. So if you're interested to learn a bit about his background, his journey, his thoughts on this web, and also his thoughts on Web3, then do go check out that episode there. And as I'm assuming, as always, Juan, there you go. Thank you, Ren Shah Thank you for the correction on the pronunciation. And yeah, as Juan has linked it there, go ahead and check it out. Alrighty, wonderful. Now we will hand over to Anna for our regularly scheduled Repo Watch section.
Thank you, Abel, and hello, everyone. Okay, so today on Repo Watch, starting as always with execution layer clients, we have had a new release of 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗀. This is version 2.60.1. Note this is still 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗀 version 2 and not version 3. And this contains a breaking change. So the second argument for block number or hash was removed from the 𝑒TH_estimate_guess method, and the 𝑒TH_estimate_guess now correctly defaults max fee per guess to block space fee. There are some fixes, so a regression with JSON marshalling of checkpoints, causing root hash to be 0 and triggering unwinds, a fix for method handler crashed for debug trace call, and a fix for unintended polygon Bohr miner gas price and transaction pool price limit sanitation on Ethereum. And it also enables DNS for P2P discovery on Holsky. Yeah, I think it's a good upgrade. You can upgrade without issues because, yeah, still 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀 version 2. Next, we have 2 new releases from Firehose Ethereum. So the least recent one, version 2.6.0. Here, Substream's engine is now able to run Rust code depends on Solana program for Solana land for decoding and on Alloy Ethereum Rust in Ethereum land. Please check the release notes on how you can take advantage of this feature. Substream clients now also enable compression, gzip compression over the network. And Substream binary type can now be optionally composed of runtime extensions by appending a plus extension at the end of the binary type. The most recent version 2.6.1, bumps Firehose core to 151 and Substreams to 173. And Bootstrapping for live blocks has improved for chains with very slow blocks or with very fast blocks. Also, Substreams fixed a slow response close to head in production mode. And we also have 2 new releases on Arbitrum Nitro. Sorry, not 2, 3 new releases on Arbitrum Nitro. So version 2.4.0, release candidate 2, which halves EIP 4844 batch size to only fill 3 batches. Then release candidate, so 2.4.0 release candidate 3, which fixes Pebble nodes and adds support for downloading snapshots split across multiple files compared to the previous release. And the most recent, so 2.4.0 release candidate 4, which disables sequencer profiling by default due to Go tracing issues on ARM compared to the last release. And I see Matty saying Pinax has upgraded to latest Firehose, but still running into issues with some chains with slow blocks. So that issue is not quite fixed. In discussion with Streaming Fast. Thank you for giving us that update. We also have a new release of Heimdall. This is version 107 beta, and this just contains some minor improvements and fixes over the previous release. And that is it. We don't have any new releases for consensus layer clients or on the graph stack. So with that, I'm handing over to Juan. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, for Protocol Watch, we don't have a ton to cover today, but I'll be brief. For on governance and research, we don't have any new updates since last IOH. Also, we don't have updates for network subgraphs. The last update, again, just as a quick reminder, was a fix to analytics subgraph, which is, already live and working hosted service. But we do have a small update for contracts repository. Mainly, there has been a little bit of work merging stuff to the Horizon branch. So again, a lot of work on the contracts team is going into the Horizon, workstream. There also has been a few chores like deploying the subgraph availability manager to prepare for multiple SIA operators, as well as adding unit tests and governance tests to the contracts. But that's pretty much it. So yeah, that's pretty much all for Protocol Watch. I'm gonna hand it over to, is Paka here? I don't think so. Thanks, Petko, for all of the applause. Okay, I'm gonna hand it over to Abel now then.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much. So, as many of you know, a lot of stuff has been happening in the ecosystem around AI, and today we're going to be speaking with the semiotic team, who are going to tell us all about everything in relation to that and what it means for you as an indexer. So, without further ado, Annie and Sam, fire away.
Sure. So I guess I can just quickly introduce myself first. Yeah, so excited to talk with all of you guys. So my name is Anirudh or Ani. I'm one of the co-authors of the AI white paper that recently came out along with Sam. So my background is in a field called multi-agent reinforcement learning. I was a researcher in that for several years. Yeah, just looking forward to giving you guys some more context and answering any questions.
Hey everyone, I think I've talked to this group quite a few times, and I think I know we have some new people on the call today, and welcome. I am also excited to be talking to you about this topic, and that where Semiotic is working on this topic in general. It's actually it's funny when we applied for the Wave 1 grants back in the day, back in 2021. We wrote another white paper to the foundation for funding, and there's a lot of overlap between that application and what we're finally starting to build today. So I'm excited about that. And um, my background also in AI. Actually, Ani and I used to work together at a research lab. Actually, we worked for the same research lab, but we didn't. And we worked together, but we didn't know we worked together. It was a big place. And my PhD is also in AI, and I'm excited that that we're bringing more these capabilities to the protocol.
Amazing. I think what we could do is start off with a breakdown of the white paper. So what we did last week is we spoke to the community here and asked questions to find out what people want to know as it relates to all of the AI news. So yeah, I think it'd be a good idea to go through the white paper and maybe give an overview to people so we can get some good questions going.
Sure. So in the white paper, what we do is we lay out the case for two new AI services built on the graph. So one of them is called the inference service. The other one is called the agent service. I can explain these a little bit. So inference is just what it's called when you run an AI model. So whenever you type something into ChatGPT and hit enter, what you're doing is you're running inference. So the inference service is just going to enable AI models such as LLMs like ChatGPT, or open versions of ChatGPT, let me say, to be brought online on the graph, and we're going to enable compute providers, the current protocol, this would be indexers, to serve these models. The agent service builds on top of the inference service, and it really tries to connect the inference service with the graph's data. So this will sort of be a graph native way to build various AI dApps. And we get into a few other things in the white paper. We get into verifiability. In the appendix, we talk a lot about things like RAG and knowledge graphs. But sort of the main thrust of the paper, in my mind, is proposing these two AI services that we're going to work on, or introducing, not proposing, and sort of showing how we can transition the graph from this compute provider that's focused on to general sort of compute provider. Sam, I'm unsure if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to add is just expand a little bit on the inference point. So, like Ani said, there's going to be two things that we're building, and we've started building. Actually, so we've started building the inference service, and later we'll build the agent service. And like Ani said, with the inference service, you take a pre-trained AI model that's it's what we call open. And I'll kind of expand on that now. So we're not talking about open source AI in general. We're talking about open models. Open source AI models mean all of the data is available, that all the data used to train the model and all the code used to train the model is made publicly available. And that excludes, if we just restrict what we're going to support to open source AI models, it would exclude things like Llama, and most of the other major ones, because Facebook doesn't, or Meta made Llama, the Llama family, and they don't open source the data, they don't open source the code, they just they give you the weights, and you can think of the weights. All of these AI models are distributed in a common file format, kind of like a PDF. Many tools can export PDFs, and any PDF reader can open a PDF. And similarly, many AI model training tools export a common file format, and anything that can run inference pretty much can run any of those models. And so we'll support this sort of like common file format for AI models. And I think one thing that a point that we've seen confusion on is that for indexers, for the inference service, if you're just running, the indexers who are running these models, it's detached from chains. So there won't be a specific model for each chain. It's just that there are these open source, or these open these open models, and you'll be able to run these models on GPUs and then basically accept inputs for the models. You'll execute the models on your GPU or CPU, depending on what model you use, and then you'll respond with the results. So, yeah.
Amazing. Oh, yeah, you seen the question?
Oh, sorry. Is there a question?
Yes. Chris has just asked 𝗨𝗂𝗂 or 𝗨𝘀𝗃𝗃, which I'm not quite sure about. So maybe, Chris, you want to expand a
Sure.
bit more, or maybe you guys already know what's being referred to here?
Yeah, the question was just about whether like that open format that you're talking about, whether that's been decided yet, or whether, that's still kind of in the design space.
Everything is pretty early at this point. Everything is in the design phase, I would say. One thing I do want to clarify a little bit based on that question is when we say AI, we're not necessarily specifically referring to LLMs. It's of course included, but any sort of AI model that you can think about, we would be pretty happy to support. Right, so you can think of AI models that do portfolio optimization that have nothing to do with large language models, and those would still be of interest to us.
Thanks, Annie.
Sure. I see some questions in the chat. Should we just do that, or I don't want to. If you have other people in line.
No, go ahead. We have a couple of questions from last week as well, but go ahead and answer these ones. Yeah.
Sure. And Sam, feel free to hop in or interrupt me whenever.
Okay.
So in terms of, are we looking at data sources outside of blockchain data? So I guess a couple parts. The inference service by itself is not necessarily hooked up to any sort of data, right? This is just here, compute. You could literally even think about, in the LLM context, running something like Llama, where some dev just creates an application where some user types in some text, hits enter, gets sent to the inference service, runs the LLM on that text, and spits out some text back. So there's no data involved in that process, right? That's pure prompt based. On the other hand, once we get towards the agent service, we will care a lot more about data, and so we do want to make sure that we integrate easily with the graph's other sources of data, whether that's GraphQL, SQL, or Geo, or whatever else. And if people want to hook things up to data outside of the graph, I don't see a problem with supporting that either. Although it might not be natively supported within the agent service, we'd have to determine that. Yeah, anything to add, Sam?
Only that data sources outside of blockchain data kind of seems to be a common theme in all the data services. People wanting to be able to bring non-blockchain data in and join it. So it's interesting because that's a common theme that I've seen.
Cool. Okay, so next question in terms of timeline. So like I said, we're still very much in the actual planning phase, working with our dev team. Up until last week, we're very much focused on subgraph SQL instead of AI. So we're still trying to figure things out in this regard. I will, we'll try to make it. We'll try to make some sort of public announcement, I guess, once we know better about the timeline. But I don't have a great answer for you right now, unfortunately. Okay, questions from last week. Thanks, Abel. Will this new announcement change the expectation for indexers? So I think in the initial phase of the inference service, what we're going to see is a lot of indexers who have sort of CPU setups. Maybe a few indexers will buy some GPUs so that they can run some AI models. Of course, So in this initial phase, we expect that indexers will be able to provide the compute for these things. As time moves on, just through pure competitive forces, as the indexers with GPUs better performance and the indexers running on CPUs, we expect to see some amount of specialization start to emerge. And so at a certain point, as an indexer, my expectation is that you will have to make a choice about whether you want to commit to improving your AI offerings, or really focus on and optimize your data pipeline, which is going to be valuable as well, right? The data pipeline will come back in from an AI perspective during the agent service. Entry-level requirements, like I said, there are lots of actually very, very useful models that can be run on CPUs. There are even LLM offerings that can be run on CPUs, but outside of that, there are other models you can run on CPUs. So entry-level requirements, there aren't many. Like I said, eventually I think competition is going to push certain people and raise the bar there. Yeah, coordination, I think Nikki answered that perfectly. We have that Graph AI channel. Happy to have you guys join. Okay, let me stop there. And Sam, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Awesome. Okay, so Chris's question, how will factors like inference speed factor into the ISA and pricing? So this is a really good question. And I actually had a long conversation about pricing these types of models with someone the other day. It's really not very obvious how you price AI models in the same way that you would price SQL queries, right? There are some things, for example, you might have a model preloaded into memory versus not having it preloaded into memory, which is going to cause a latency difference. Depending on your compute, depending on how you optimize your compute. Maybe you're specializing in the AI domain, and you have a way to batch queries and split up your compute across multiple devices. All these sorts of things change how you would price actual model. And then the second aspect of that is that it's not obvious to me, is like with something like an LLM, let's think about. It's not obvious how you could do prepayments because you don't know how many tokens this LLM is going to output until it's actually run, right? So I guess to answer your question, Chris, we have some early thoughts around how we're going to think how we're going to account for all these things within the ISA and within pricing. But it's like I think in this case the decentralization actually adds a bit of complexity to this, because instead of just taking in all the variables and sort of merging it into one number, we have this thing where from an indexer's perspective, like I know currently a lot of indexers struggle with figuring out how to price their GraphQL queries, right? A lot of people just put down the minimum and let the gateway figure out that pricing. And so if we're going to be operating under the same thing, under the same model where we're sort of expecting that many indexers don't know how to price their queries, how to price inference. Yeah, it's just complicated, and I can maybe get into more details offline, but it's probably I'd probably need like diagrams and stuff.
Maybe going into that a little bit more. That whenever this conversation or the billing question comes up, verifiability comes up in my mind, and maybe I can quickly go over the path towards verifiability for this space. In general, we've seen, even before I got into crypto, when I was working on my PhD, one of the problems with research in the space was repeatability, determinism. So there were so many papers out there where they were like, I trained it and it sucked, or I redid the experiments described in this paper and I didn't get the same results. So they couldn't get determinism, and determinism is a prerequisite for verifiability. And because you at least in the like worst case, you need to be able to have like another indexer be able to rerun a result and see if they got the same thing as somebody else, like if there's a dispute. and this has been a problem historically. But there are ways. So there are ways to get determinism. Like for example, one group called 𝗨𝗶𝗀𝗳𝗀𝗀. They have some good researchers, and they used a package called SoftFloat, and it was a CPU only version. It didn't run on the GPU; it ran on the CPU. But they were able to get deterministic results out of Llama. So there's been, like, especially in the Web3 space, I think there are a lot of groups doing some similar things as us, and so I think we'll solve determinism. And once we have determinism, then we can start thinking about, first thing you can think about is just getting, if there's a dispute, you have another indexer run it and see if they get the same thing. You could do like M out of N consensus. And then also 𝗨𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗀 had a nice paper using optimistic, basically fraud proofs. You can use fraud proofs to dispute inference, because a neural network is really just a simple program. It's a directed graph of computations, and you can do this like bisection game to see where the results differ pretty efficiently, and we can even do it in an automated way once we have determinism. And then what's off the table is ZK for these large language models. You may have seen some projects talking about ZK, which has ZK, as you know, probably know, has some amazing properties. For example, you don't care about trust at all. You only have to trust that the math was correct. But the problem is that the proofs with ZK for these modern neural networks take days to generate. So imagine someone sends you a query, like you send to ChatGPT, and imagine if it took you a day, or ChatGPT a day, to respond to your query. That's what we will always be looking at for state-of-the-art models. Groups will show good ZK results on tiny models. They can do it today. Make the model tiny enough, then you can do ZK today, but we're talking about so tiny that they're not going to be useful for anything today. In the future, we'll be able to do useful things with relatively smaller models with ZK. Ani, do you want to answer this? Vince's question?
Oh, sorry, I didn't even see there's a new question. Let me scroll down. Thoughts on decentralized AI, dangers it may pose. Yeah, so this is, I mean, there are two sides to the coin, right? Like, there's one side where, in terms of like censorship resistance, and then there's the other side where it's like, well, we really want people to be able to get answers to these questions, and I think in particular, like, get answers to these sorts of questions more easily than they currently could, right? Like, maybe you could today, but it's not so obvious or how to find information on some of this stuff. And I'm not an expert there. There are people dedicated to AI safety. It's something that we've sort of left as a question mark in the white paper. We basically, on purpose, say initially that only we don't know the scope yet. It might be semiotic, it might be 𝗨𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 or something. We'll be able to deploy new models. And during that time, we're going to be figuring out a lot more of the safety stuff and how we actually want to tackle these questions. It's a question mark, and I think even Sam's talked about it with Eva. So, there are a lot of people within the ecosystem who are thinking about this.
Yeah, and it's this is an unsolved problem in general. It's like, it's greater. You could basically, there's a lot of research going on right now in this space for safety, AI safety, and it's the problem is much bigger than semiotic can tackle. We can like follow the latest trends, but we're talking about in general, right? Semiotic isn't going to be training state-of-the-art models. We have thousands of other people doing that, maybe tens of thousands of people focused on training state-of-the-art models. And similarly, there are thousands of other people focused on looking at safety. And, the best that we can do, given resource constraints, is follow what's happening, incorporate state-of-the-art models, track the safety topics, and then try to incorporate those things. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be up to indexers whether or not they want to support those models, right? And so in the future, I think what we'll probably want to do is, at least for the open source models, imagine you have an open source model that has a high signal on it, and you could get a lot of rewards. But imagine that it's also known that model is dangerous. And then it's going to be, there's this extra cognitive overhead for you to decide, like, okay, well, I could get a lot of money to run this thing, but it's also dangerous. So then maybe you don't run it. And then, but maybe, on the other hand, maybe another indexer does run it. And then what does the protocol, if another indexer, either doesn't know, doesn't care, doesn't know, then the question is, what do we do as a protocol? Yeah, that looks like, Vince, that I would like to use that model if you'll run it for me. Let's see. Okay, Chris asks, can you talk more about how these inference capabilities can be coupled with data that indexers already have to offer to provide unique capabilities? Ani, maybe I'll let you go for this one.
Sure. So can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
We can indeed.
Okay, sweet. This is diagrams that we actually have in the white paper, so it might look familiar to some of you. So this is an example of an agent that converts natural language to SQL, which if you've been playing around with agency, you might have seen something like this already. And this is sort of what we imagine, what we envisage as like a direct connection between AI and data, or you could also flip the arrow around and you could use SQL data as an input to an AI model. So here we have a user asking the AI gateway, give me the last 10 trades on Uniswap. Goes to an AI indexer. AI indexer serves this via one of their models, generates SQL, gets passed to the SQL gateway directly, gets the requested data and returns it. Like I said, you could reverse the flow here. So it could be the case where you want to do some analysis on some data, let's say, and you already know the SQL. So you could, for instance, send the SQL gateway some query, retrieve some data, passes it to the AI gateway. The AI gateway maybe writes some Python code to do some analysis on this data, and returns you like some plots or some results that you might find interesting. So this is sort of how we see this connection between various components, and you can imagine this getting a lot more complex, actually. Let me show, to remember which diagram number it is. Yeah, this one. So in this diagram, you can see like a more complex example of natural language to SQL, right? So same concept, but this is heavily using all throughout as we define them. So similar question, what are some common trades people make? You could envisage this going to a geo-knowledge graph, a geo-agent. The geo-agent has the backing of the geo-knowledge graph. So it'll get some information that could help it answer the question. So it's going to use this information, extract from the knowledge graph to then refine the query. So we go from what are some common trades people make to what are the top 10 swaps on Uniswap v3 in the last month. This could get passed to a VectorDB agent. This VectorDB text-to-SQL agent is going to look for like similar questions and queries that people have asked in the past, and use this to actually generate SQL that's more accurate. And finally, this would get passed, similar to what we saw in the last diagram, to the SQL agent, which is just the SQL gateway plus an LLM. So there you get this table of SQL results and your response to your original question or your analysis or whatever you want. So you hopefully see, like, throughout this entire thing, there are multiple places where you see agents. You see this intense agent, geo agent, text SQL agent, SQL agent. LLMs, all these things we see as being built on top of the Graph's AI services. And then you also have the Graph's data via this like geo-knowledge graph. We've had some conversations around enabling like a vector DB service as well. And of course, SQL. And hopefully that gives you sort of an idea about what we're thinking about in the future as being like the types of things we could build on top of this. Sam, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Maybe you could show it.
That would be
You
awesome.
got it. Give me 1 second.
In the meantime, I'll talk to one of Chris's questions. What are your thoughts on navigating the trade-off between the graph becoming more of a general purpose compute platform versus offering more of a focused set of data services? I think that the power of the graph ultimately is in the data that we have. I was even, the reason that AI was so compelling, well, there are two reasons to me. One is that we have some economies of scale in the graph in the sense that we've already built this big network of specialized compute providers. And I'm talking about the process of indexing today. So we have this large network of people who are running these heavy duty machines and processing a lot of data. And we have a payment system in place, and we have a way to route queries in place. And we have a go-to-market in place, like a big marketing capability. We already have a token. And so to add AI to what we've already built is a relatively small step compared to building an entire new decentralized AI inference and agent protocol from scratch. You have to then go through and build all these components over again. But that being said, it does make me a little bit nervous, to be honest, that we are branching into AI because it is a step away from just like our pure data specialty. And I think combining like the economies of scale argument with the fact that historically there's a saying in AI and machine learning that data is queen, and there's another saying that whoever has the most data wins in AI and machine learning. And so there is this nice connection between AI and our data that I think that's what I'm personally most excited about happen joining these two things. And speaking of that, I think Ani may have the demo ready.
Two. Okay, so this is agency. It's currently open. If you just go to agency.xyz, I think someone I saw posted, yeah, Chris posted it in the chat earlier, so thank you for that. You can ask it some questions. It's doing something very similar to what I just showed in the SQL agent picture, where it's taking your natural language question, converting it to SQL, and then running that. And it specifically works on, there's some limitations listed here. So you get Uniswap versions 2, 3, and X. That's like DeFi data. So I guess maybe, I don't even remember the question. It was something like, what were the top 10 trades on Uniswap? So let's just do that. Unless, Sam, did you have something else you wanted to ask instead?
That's a good one.
Cool. Let's do V3 last month. Live demos always worry me, especially when we're actively updating the code, but we'll see how this goes. So currently it's going through, I sort of kept this picture up. Let me see. Yeah, it's this one. So currently it's going through sort of something similar to this part where we took this, we're passing it to some sort of AI model. In this case, it's GPT-4. It'll generate the SQL and we'll run it against the database that we have.
I think it's broken right now.
Is it?
Yeah, because I'm
Probably
running
updated it.
one of our test queries, and it's hanging.
Yeah, we've been actively updating this thing, so I'm not super surprised to hear that.
Yeah, we're getting it ready for a competition that's going to start tomorrow. So we're putting making some last minute changes to get that ready.
Yeah, so let's just say this is the idea, and I think Sam, actually, you have some like demos that like videos or something you can probably share in
I
the
do.
chat.
Give me just a moment, and I'll pull one up. I'll share it in the chat. In the meantime, maybe Ani, if there's another question that you could answer, I think I saw a few more.
Yes, there are a few more. Chris,
Go ahead.
just to go back to Chris's one, he asked, do you see the future where consumers could provide LoRa adapters to load on top of a base model like Llama 3? Just want to highlight that one in case so it doesn't get forgotten.
Sure. Yeah, that's totally possible. Probably won't be our focus up front. But we're also, not really looking at enabling fine-tuning at this point in time. If we do, that would probably be its own AI service of some sort. But yeah, in the future, if people want to do stuff like that, I don't see any reason why we couldn't enable it.
Sweet.
Okay. Other
Sorry.
question? Go
Yeah.
ahead.
It's quite a long one. Will building the agent/inference service require an entirely new protocol infrastructure, or do you think the Graph's current build is easily extractable to these new services?
Yeah, so this is a great question. There are pieces that we can reuse and there are pieces that we can't. What we can reuse is a lot of the. Actually, let me pull up this diagram again. While I talk about this. So a lot of the pieces that we can reuse are, for example, in terms of index or service and tap, like all of that logic more or less stays the same. We probably need to extend it to actually be jobs-based instead of request-response-based. But that's fairly doable. The gateway, again, probably lots we can reuse there. That said, of course, we'll need to make changes to how the ISA works and things like that. And obviously, there's no graph node concept for these things. These things would have a totally different. We need to replace graph node with something totally else. It's totally different for the AI services. So in terms of like how much of the stack are we reusing? Probably index or service, a lot of the code from the gateway, then graph node. We'll just do it from scratch for AI. Other questions? Chris, sorry, to respond to Chris real quick. I don't know. Well, so the tap aspect of payments will be reusable, but yeah, like I said earlier, I think there's going to be there are actually like, let's say, significant nuances to actually reusing a lot of the payment infrastructure. That's the one caveat I'd put on what you said. Otherwise, I'd agree. We've had conversations with Alexi to try to figure out how we need to adapt tap to actually support these things. Because like I said, it's not prepayments in this case is not going to work very well. We would probably need post payments. And yeah, tap is sort of entirely structured for prepayments right now.
I'm actually oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a fun question for me. Chris just asked, can you talk more about how team members at Semiotic are using ChatGPT and other AI solutions to work harder, better, faster, stronger? That's a great song. Um, so I'm using. I'll just share with you. I think probably everybody on this call is using it. It's kind of like at this point, I think hearing people talk. I'm starting to feel like hearing people talk about how they use AI is like hearing people tell you about their dreams. Um, But so I uh, I I upload PDFs. I have the thing summarized like technical PDFs for me because I'm too lazy. I don't want to read. I don't want to read all this thing. I just want a quick summary, and then maybe I'll iterate a little bit and ask more technical questions. Sometimes I even ask for like pseudocode from the paper, although that fails a lot. These are like technical papers. I also use it. I don't code much these days in general because I'm doing a lot of like managing. But I do like to code. I still like to build things, and so I'll use ChatGPT to get my code skeletons in place. I'll post a link to a project I did entirely with ChatGPT. It was a hackathon project where you could describe a Doge or an NFT, a picture, and then generate NFT. This was actually Coulson inspired me to do this. He and I were hanging out in Tokyo at ETH Tokyo. Um, yeah, that's how I'm using. Oh, I guess the final thing is when I'm writing. Sometimes I'm writing a lot of stuff, and I'll get all sorts of feedback, and I'll just sometimes I'll just copy what I wrote and the feedback and say, okay, merge this feedback, and then I'll tweak. I'll tweak it. That way, I don't have to sit there and like think about how to restructure my argument or what I've written to incorporate the feedback.
Yeah, in my case, I actually don't personally see much current utility in large language models. I'm more interested in other aspects of AI. So I don't really use Copilot or anything. I tried it out for a bit, but I found that I ended up spending so much time just reviewing its code that it ended up being slower in the long run for me. Um, so, for the most part, AI is not really in my workflow unless you want to count like, I guess Grammarly sometimes will suggest some stuff or whatever Google Docs makes in terms of suggestions. But at least for stuff that I want to rely on things like code, uh, I don't get too much use out of large language models currently. Like I said, to me, the use cases of AI are sort of the things that excite me about AI or other areas, right? So in terms of things like portfolio optimization or recommender systems or um, multi-agent teaming and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I don't really have any tips to work harder, better, faster, stronger. Uh, to answer your question, to talk about portfolio optimization a little bit, I guess. Um, yeah, so they typically hedge funds and stuff, they're not going to be using things like large language models for this, or not, especially not things that they can't rely on it, right? So even neural networks to this day are pretty rare, from my understanding. They tend to use sort of old school machine learning techniques, which are very statistical in nature, in which you can give like sort of guarantees and uh, like statistical guarantees about how this thing is going to perform. So they are actually a lot more reliable. So to answer the question about supporting, how we're going to bootstrap this thing. I think to start with, it's really going to be a focused effort, probably from Semiotic to bootstrap this thing. So we're going to be putting models up there ourselves, like I said before, and really trying to figure out with the community, what models they care about the most, what should we be prioritizing. So if you're interested in participating in that conversation, go join that 𝗨𝗨𝗂𝗟𝗶 channel, and at some point we'll probably start talking about that. But, over time we do want to start to open things up more and more, and start to get more of the community involved in actually creating AI models and deploying them. Yeah, so that's, I guess, something to look forward to. Final questions? We've got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I've got one. So, you mentioned, we've got another one for Chris. I'll just quickly ask mine and then we'll hand it to Chris. You mentioned it's still pretty early, and no timelines. Can you give us any direction on like what the next step is? If you don't have a good idea on timeline, what's the next step internally to push the ball down the road on this? Because it's all very exciting.
Yeah, so I'll answer, I guess, in 2 parts. So one part is we definitely want to be on the side where we're letting product leave dev as opposed to the other way around. So we've already started having sort of a lot of conversations with people. There are a few different events. I've personally talked to somewhere between 30 and 40 people over the last week and a half or so. So we're just trying to understand better, like, what is the form of the thing that's actually going to help the community the most in this case. So that's from a product perspective. We also want to put out like a lot of content in terms of, I think a lot of conversations that I've had, a lot of people sort of have misunderstandings about what even inference means. A lot of people think that you need agents to actually do something useful with AI instead of having just inference. So yeah, these are all sort of misconceptions maybe that we need to address in blog posts or other sorts of content. From a development perspective, I think the first thing that we have planned is really just to focus on like some sort of a walking skeleton where we can make a pipeline that just does one model, serves it well, and then build on top of that and build out from that, instead of trying to tackle the full scope of decentralized market of inference providers at once. And so we'll be focusing on things like probably we're going to put these models up on IPFS, so we want to validate that. What is the format in which we should store these models such that it's easiest for indexers to run? Like, should these all be containerized? Probably. And these are all questions we'll answer in this initial phase. Yeah, those are the 2 perspectives, right? The product perspective and the developer perspective. Chris asked about wide scope for many types of AI models. First targeted use cases, LLM. First targeted use cases, like I said, we're just going to be going for something that's walking skeleton-like, and I think right now where people would be able to interact with this the best is probably with something like an LLM, right? It's going to be a lot harder if we put out a very specialized technical model to create some sort of a playground where people can mess around and get an idea about what we're trying to do. So I'll probably start there. And then Chris also asked about the demographic of user.
Ani,
Yes, go ahead.
could I add to that? I think I personally like what Mickey said about AI-powered Explorer. I think dogfooding the AI, the inference service to improve the Explorer seems exciting to me. Can't commit to it at the moment, but I think it's a nice way to dogfood the tech and improve our user experience. If we could use it to improve our user experience and developer experience.
For sure. And Chris, you asked about the demographic. Right now we're being pretty broad. We're just trying to talk to as many people as possible and try to understand where this thing is going to fit in best. So we've talked to other protocols, to developers, sort of the full spectrum.
I like this Vince's question. Where is the actionable AI going? Do you see it's doing stuff? Is it going to do stuff on my behalf versus just telling me, like an assistant? The way now we get into like speculation a bit, but I view, agents. This is the first year. So Ani and I have been working on various types of agents for a long time, and this is the year that went mainstream. But I would say that we're still at this sort of hello world stage of agents where think about like how this is new tech. It's like it's just so primitive right now. And what you're going to see over the next 5-10 years is I'm expecting that we're going to see like many doublings of abilities in these models that we're using. So imagine, 5-10 years from now, uh, what if GPT were like 100 times better and faster? And you can imagine what these things are going to be able to do. So I think initially it will probably be more suggestions, and over time, as we get more trust in these things and we figure out the UX, like how to efficiently interact with these things, I think there's going to be a lot more stuff that's automated for us and things that are actually taking actions. I think Ani has a different. Ani, do you have a different perspective?
A little bit. I think I agree with you in terms of yeah, I think these things are going to get more powerful. I think to me, we talk about this a lot more in the appendix of the white paper, but I really see, at least within the Web3 space, the future sort of being this internet of agents. This term you hear bandied about. So we have a few diagrams in the white paper. You can look into more. I won't go into detail just in the interest of time. But we're hoping that by breaking down problems into these smaller pieces, where instead of trying to create one massive agent that does everything, that can, execute swaps on dexes and also delegate GRT to indexers, we can create this sort of web of agents, or this tree of agents, as we put it here, that can specialize, and then individual people can focus on these individual components. And this also gives us the advantage in that you don't need these sort of models with massive compute capabilities to be able to tackle, every single problem in the universe. You just need problems that are models that are specialized on specific problems, with limited compute, sort of limited capabilities in that regard. And so this is sort of how I would, I see the future evolving. But I guess we'll see.
We have lots of good questions continuing to come through, and I just want to make sure that Annie and Sam, if you guys have a couple more minutes to flow over, is that a possibility?
Yes, for me.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, is that good for you as well, Annie?
Yeah, I can do a few more minutes.
Okay, amazing. Chris asked a phenomenal question, which is, do you have any questions for the indexer community? Any assumptions you'd like to validate? How can indexes be helpful? Yeah, it goes both ways, so we'd love to help with you guys if you have any things you want to ask us.
Honestly, right now, keep asking questions. Please join that Graph AI channel. You guys are helping us figure out where we have gaps in our understanding, as well as just where we're not so great at communicating these ideas yet. And both of those are important for us going forwards. As time develops, as we start to have like more of a concrete plan about when we want to bring indexers online in this process, we'll probably be sending out surveys and other things to try to figure out, who wants to participate, what sort of compute they can bring, that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's it from my perspective. Sam?
I do have a question for indexers. I'm expecting that some of you are going to beef up your compute, probably buy some GPUs. These GPUs, you can end up spending a lot of money on these things, and I'm assuming you're going to want to keep them busy once you buy buy the hardware. And I'm curious, what I'm expecting to happen is similar to to DRPC. I know quite a few indexers participate in DRPC because it's just more efficient for them, and I'll be curious to see what happens as this isn't really a question, it's just a kind of curiosity. What's going to happen once you have GPUs? There's going to be, I imagine there's going to be a desire to always keep these GPUs running, and if the graph like whereas the graph, with the data, it's more of a specialized thing where you can only really serve the graph's data. You can't really serve that graph's data on another protocol. But with GPUs, you can both participate in our inference service, and you'll be able to participate in other decentralized AI protocols, I would imagine, pretty easily, depending on like configuration. And I'm just, so that's more of a question mark in my mind because it seems a little bit different. It seems like it just seems different compared to indexing blockchain data. Yeah, they're expensive. High-end GPUs are expensive. That's why you're going to want to keep them busy if you buy these things. Chris had a good question. Can you talk about the intersection of semi-autonomous AI agents and crypto as financial rails for them to act in the economy? I mean, I think I'm very excited about this question. I think, I've seen, maybe someone asked me what the most interesting thing that I've seen was in terms of automation or something like that above. This is related to Chris's question. I saw a project where people are using these agent frameworks now to go out to things like, what are they called? Like Fiverr, and find like coding, request for coding. And then you can imagine having training, not training, but using agents that go out and try to pick up small programming tasks and just fully participating in these things, and then kind of going off into the sci-fi realm. But this is kind of what Ani was talking about with this hierarchical agent tree. You can imagine you're like a planning agent, but you don't know how to code. And you're aware, like on the graph, for example, you have agents that do know how to code, and you can pay them crypto to do the code. So now you have like this Web 2 sort of agent that participates in the economy, probably starting with the software knowledge working economy. And you have this planning manager agent looking for jobs. It has some like fiat on ramp, off ramp. Maybe it has a credit card, but it also has a wallet. And it could then go out and like interact with these other decentralized protocols and like outsource this work and manage this work. And I think that's interesting. What will that do? That's an interesting thing to me.
Just to add on to that briefly, one thing that I think that's going to help out with a lot is just complexity of crypto currently, like all the different tokens you might have to manage, all the different tokenomics you might have to manage if you're actually trying to participate in this ecosystem. So I think one thing that these agents are able to do, just as they're just mathematical functions, right? So they're able to analyze these things and understand them with a lot more success, like all the nuances of these things with a lot more success than we can. One of the classic examples from reinforcement learning is just what's called a reward misspecification problem, in which essentially, if you design a reward function for an agent in a certain way, it basically looks for ways to exploit that, and it looks for all the things that you didn't think about. I think this will be great in two ways, right? These AI agents will help us test protocols, make them more robust, but also after that, they'll sort of they'll help us participate in these protocols in ways that are more optimal and maybe closer to even the protocol designer's original intent, because sometimes we're not the best at translating our intent to economic policies. Yeah, I appreciate all the questions. I probably have to hop now. I don't know if there's anything last second or if Sam can stay, but thank you
Yeah,
guys
I
so
need
much.
to leave too. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much to you both for giving all of your information and answering all the questions. We very much appreciate it. And thank you to each and every one of you for joining today as well. This was very insightful, and I am very much excited for the future, considering everything that we've discussed. Just as a reminder, the POAP code is in the chat. Go ahead and check that out there. And just as another reminder, it's always in the agenda. So if you ever, you know what the POAP code is, it's always there, so you can get it ASAP as soon as the window's open. Thanks, everyone. I really enjoyed this session. I hope you did too. And we look forward to seeing you again, same time next week for another amazing session. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.